I'm James Carter, standing frozen as I watch my beloved Victorian house burn to ashes. This house with its deep green paint my grandfather chose. The carnation garden he planted 100 years ago is now just rubble. Through the smoke I see Linda Grayson, my arrogant neighbor, standing in her yard, coffee mug in hand, sipping with a triumphant smile. She thinks she's won the war between us. She's wrong. Linda doesn't know who I am, a federal judge with the power to crush everything she's built. But how far did she push me before I revealed my true identity? It started like any other day. I was sitting on my grandfather's ancient rocking chair, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink over the deep green of the Victorian house. Then I saw her, Linda Grayson, striding toward my mailbox, envelope in hand like it was a treasure. Her fake smile sent chills down my spine. I knew that look, the look of someone who'd hosted HOA meetings in her newly renovated house next door. The Victorian at 142 Ashwood Lane wasn't just a house, it was the blood and bones of my family. My grandfather, Thomas Carter, laid the foundation for this legacy. Back in the 1940s, when Fairview was a sleepy little town, he bought this land with nothing but his bare hands. He was a lawyer, a tall man with a deep voice, always in a suit even in scorching heat. He built this house himself, every plank, every brick, to make it a sanctuary for our family through the hardest times. I still remember summer afternoons on that century-old rocking chair, the one I was using this morning before Linda stuffed the envelope in my mailbox. Grandpa would tell me about the battle he fought with the local government in 1948. They wanted to tear down the house for a highway expansion, but he used his legal know-how to save it. "James," he'd say, voice stern, "never let anyone take what's yours just because they think they're stronger. This land, this house, it's our soul. Protect it, no matter the cost." I nodded, not fully understanding, but his words carved themselves into my heart. The house wasn't just beautiful for the deep green paint he mixed himself, the color of the Oregon forests he loved, or the carnation garden he planted to remember my grandmother, who died young. It held the little details I cherished. Stained glass windows he bought from an old church, a legal bookshelf stuffed with his yellowed books, and the collection of fountain pens he used to write lawsuits. Every night, the wind chimes hanging on the porch, a gift he made for my mom when I was born, rang like a lullaby, reminding me of my roots. Linda wanted me to take them down, repaint the house a bland beige, rip out the garden. She called it progress, I called it an insult. When he died, I was 19. Just starting law school. The night before he passed, he held my hand, weak but firm. "James, I'm giving you this house. Don't let it fall into the hands of those who don't understand its worth." I swore I'd keep my word. That's why I moved back to Ashwood Lane after becoming a federal judge, to protect his legacy, to live in the space he created. I never imagined my enemy would be Linda Grayson, the neighbor with the fake smile and expensive coffee mug. This morning, when Linda marched to my mailbox, the envelope in her hand was a declaration of war. I opened it, an invitation to join the HOA, a $6,000 initiation fee, plus $400 a month. Attached was a list of mandatory upgrades: repaint the house, beige, uproot the carnations, remove the wind chimes. I looked out the window, and saw her snapping photos of Grandpa's garden, her eyes dripping with disdain. I knew she hated the wildness of the carnations, hated the chimes clinking, hated how my house stood out among her cookie-cutter street. Linda wanted to erase it, turn Ashwood Lane into her soulless canvas. But she didn't understand. I wasn't just defending a house. I was defending a promise to my grandfather, and myself. I heard Linda on the phone as she walked away. "Yeah, I just delivered the final offer. He'll have to join. His house is the last thorn on this street." She thought I had no choice. Linda Grayson wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was a calculated threat. After dropping the envelope in my mailbox that morning, she disappeared into her renovated house next door, but I knew she wasn't done. I'd heard whispers about her in the Ashwood Lane neighborhood since moving back 2 years ago. Linda, about 50, was a real estate agent in Portland until she got fired for fraud, a scandal involving forged documents to sell public land. She moved to Fairview, bought the house next to mine with money no one could trace, and immediately started her plan to control the neighborhood. Her HOA wasn't a friendly group of neighbors. It was her tool to manipulate everything, from property values to our lives. The envelope she stuffed in my mailbox wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum. I opened it, reading each line with a mix of anger and amusement. Welcome to the Ashwood Lane HOA, your chance to elevate the neighborhood. Starting with a $6,000 entry fee, followed by $400 monthly. But what made my hands shake wasn't the money. It was the attached list of demands. Repaint my Victorian house a neutral beige, rip out Grandpa's carnation garden, remove the porch wind chimes. Linda called it community standards. I called it a blatant insult to my family's legacy. I looked out the window, saw her photographing my garden, her gaze full of contempt, as if the wild carnations were an unforgivable sin. That night I decided to confront her. I grabbed the envelope, walked to Linda's house, and knocked. The doorbell played a haughty tune, something like her victory song. Linda opened the door, wearing a silk robe, her HOA president badge gleaming on her chest. Her smile was so saccharine it made my skin crawl. I saw your invitation, I said, keeping my voice steady from 20 years in courtrooms. I decline. This house is a family legacy, and I'll keep it how my grandfather wanted. Linda's smile vanished, fast as a light switch flicking off. She leaned toward me, voice lowering. You don't get it, James. This isn't optional. The HOA's legally registered. Your house is the last outlier on this street. You will join. I pulled out the deed I'd studied long ago. Actually, no. My title predates your HOA. I have no legal obligation. Linda's face flushed, but she quickly regained her composure. Listen, she hissed, dropping the sweetness. This neighborhood's changing. Progress waits for no one. If you don't keep up, things will get tough. Accidents happen to non-compliant houses. Fines pile up. I'm just asking you to think about it. I stared into her eyes. Is that a threat, Miss Grayson? She stepped back, fake smile returning. Not at all. I'm just concerned for your property value. Old houses like yours have issues. Electrical, structural. It'd be awful if something happened just because you're clinging to the past. Behind her, I saw her husband, Henry Grayson, lurking in the shadowed hallway, phone in hand. Henry, a retired cop, had the look of someone used to intimidating people. His eyes were cold, sizing me up. I nodded politely, turned away, but Linda's voice followed. 1 week, James. You've got 1 week to change your mind before the HOA board discusses enforcement measures. Linda Grayson thought she could scare me with a few words and a fake smile, but she didn't know who I was, not really. As I walked back home after that confrontation, hands clenched around my deed, I wasn't just thinking about the Victorian at 142 Ashwood Lane or my promise to Grandpa. I was thinking about the journey that brought me here, a journey that started on the gritty streets of Portland's slums, where the law wasn't always a friend, but often an enemy. I was born in a crumbling apartment in East Portland, walls so thin you could hear the neighbors' fights every night. My dad was a construction worker, my mom a seamstress, but money was never enough. When I was 8, we got evicted for missing rent, cops banging on the door, furniture tossed to the curb. I still remember my dad begging for more time, but the landlord just smirked, the same way Linda looked at me over her coffee mug as my house burned. That day, I told myself I'd never let anyone take what's mine without a fight. Grandpa, Thomas Carter, was the only light in those dark years. He took my family into Ashwood Lane, gave us a home when no one else would. He taught me to read law from the old books in his study, yellowed pages marked with his fingerprints. The law's a weapon, James, he said. Use it right, and you can protect the powerless. I carried his words with me when I earned a scholarship to the University of Oregon, studying law with a hunger to prove a slum kid could stand tall in this world. After graduating, I worked as a prosecutor in Portland, facing every kind of criminal, from petty thieves to gang members. But the case that shaped me came at 35, when I became a federal judge in Seattle. A real estate mafia had burned dozens of homes in poor neighborhoods to force people to sell cheap, then built luxury condos. I presided over that case, 3 tense months of phone threats and shadows outside my window. The day I sentenced the ringleader to 30 years, his crew fell apart. The press called me the Iron Judge. Criminals called me a nightmare. I just saw myself honoring Grandpa, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. When I moved back to Fairview 2 years ago, I wanted peace in Grandpa's house, where I'd played as a kid, where the wind chimes lulled me to sleep. No wife, no kids. The Victorian with its deep green paint and carnation garden was my only family. I never expected to face someone like Linda Grayson, not a mafia, not a crime boss, but a neighbor with a twisted ambition. She thought I was just a stubborn guy clinging to the past. She didn't know I'd faced enemies 100 times more dangerous than her, and I'd never lost. That night, after Linda's threats of accidents and fines, I sat in the study, staring at Grandpa's bookshelf, listening to the wind chimes outside. I knew she wasn't bluffing. Henry Grayson, her husband, lurking behind her with those cold eyes, reminded me of the henchmen I'd seen in courtrooms. Linda might not carry a gun, but she had money, neighborhood clout, and clearly a bigger plan than forcing me to repaint. I pulled out my laptop, digging into the Ashwood Lane HOA. If Linda wanted to play, I'd play by my rules. 20 years in law taught me one thing: the most dangerous enemy is the one who doesn't know who they're up against. Linda would learn that soon enough. After that night facing Linda Grayson, I knew the war had begun, not with fists, but with petty, vicious moves. Linda didn't waste time striking. The next morning, as I went to grab the paper, a bright orange notice slapped on my front door hit me. Ashwood Lane HOA violation, grass over 8 inches, noisy wind chimes, non-compliant paint. I looked around. My lawn was mowed last week. The chimes sang softly as always, and Grandpa's deep green paint was flawless. This wasn't a notice, it was a warning. I wasn't surprised to see Linda a few houses down, phone in hand, snapping pictures of my house with a smug look. She wore an expensive tracksuit, her HOA badge glinting on her chest, like she was patrolling her domain. I smirked, went inside, and grabbed the small camcorder I kept in the study, something I'd used as a prosecutor to log evidence. If Linda wanted to play the rules game, I'd show her I played better. I set up a tiny security camera on the porch, hidden behind a carnation pot, aimed straight at the street. 20 years in law taught me one thing: always have proof. Just days later, the harassment escalated. One Saturday morning, a lawnmower roared at 6 a.m., right under my bedroom window. I looked out. A landscaping crew stood in front of my house, wearing HOA logo uniforms, pretending to clean the sidewalk, but clearly making noise on purpose. Linda stood nearby, directing them with her fake smile. I stepped out, coffee still in hand. "What are you doing on my property?" I asked, voice calm but firm. One guy glanced at me, uneasy. "Mrs. Grayson said, it's a community service." Linda cut in, voice syrupy. "We're just helping you, James. Your place looks a bit unkempt." I locked eyes with her. "This is private property. Leave or I call the cops." She shrugged, signaled the crew to go, but her look said it all. This was just the start. That night, my camera caught what I'd been waiting for. Around midnight, Linda and Henry Grayson appeared outside my fence. Linda whispered, pointing at the carnation garden. "If he won't budge, we'll make him." "There's ways." Henry nodded, voice low like back in his cop days. "I'll handle the rest." They didn't know I was watching on my laptop screen in the study, recording every word. I stayed calm, not revealing I was a federal judge. Not yet. But I knew Linda wouldn't stop at threats. She wanted to destroy my house, piece by piece. By the weekend, a second warning letter arrived, this time for flowers exceeding height regulations. I smirked, filed it in the dossier I'd started. Linda thought she could break me with these stunts, but she didn't get it. I'd faced real estate mafias willing to kill for land. Compared to them, Linda was an amateur with an overpriced coffee mug and a ridiculous badge. I called an old friend at the Fairview Police Department, asking him to check if Henry still had ties to the force. If Linda had her husband covering her back, I needed to know. While waiting, I double-checked my deed. Everything was legal, no loopholes for the HOA to exploit. Linda could harass me with mowers and letters, but she couldn't win by law. And me, I had the law in my hands, and the experience to make people like her tremble. When Linda Grayson and Henry skulked onto my camera footage, whispering about making me budge, I knew this wasn't just petty harassment anymore. Linda wasn't acting alone, and her words in the dark weren't empty threats. They were signs of a bigger plan targeting my Victorian house. I decided to dig deeper, not just to protect Grandpa's legacy, but to figure out why Linda was so obsessed with controlling me. What I uncovered made me realize I wasn't just facing an arrogant neighbor. I was up against a family with a dark scheme. I started with Linda. Through a few old contacts from my prosecutor days, I confirmed what I'd suspected. Linda was a real estate agent in Portland, fired after forging documents to sell public land, a scandal that cost her everything but her ambition. She came to Fairview 4 years ago, married Henry Grayson, a retired cop who left amid rumors of tampering with fire reports. Henry wasn't upright. He was a man used to bending the law for cash, and Linda clearly picked him for that reason. I dug deeper. The house next to mine was bought through Pierce Holdings, a company under Margaret Pierce, Linda's sister-in-law. The company was a shell, doing nothing but snapping up Fairview land at oddly low prices. The night after the lawnmower incident, Linda held an HOA meeting right in her front yard, less than 10 meters from my house. I stood behind the curtains, recorder on through a cracked window. Linda's voice rang out, sweet but icy. James Carter's house is the last obstacle. Handle it, and Ashwood Lane's value doubles. We need to modernize, and he's holding us back. Scattered agreement came from the crowd. Neighbors either bought off or too scared to object. Henry cut in, voice low like a man used to giving orders. I've got ways to deal with holdouts. Leave it to me. Another voice, unfamiliar, chuckled, this land's gold, Linda. Finish this, and we're set. Linda replied, patience. It's all going to plan. I sat down with my laptop, piecing it together. Pierce Holdings had bought 5 Fairview homes in the past 3 years, all after freak incidents, kitchen fires, burst pipes, collapsed walls. Desperate owners sold cheap, and Margaret's company turned them into empty lots, waiting for the right moment. I called my friend at the Fairview police. He confirmed Henry investigated 3 of those cases, all ruled accidents, with no questions asked. Linda didn't just want me in the HOA to repaint or rip out the carnations. She wanted my house gone entirely, leaving an empty plot for her scheme. The next morning, I went to the county office, digging through property records. An old 1995 map chilled me. Ashwood Lane sat on a planned commercial expansion route, a project stalled but recently revived by a shadowy investor group. My house, with its corner spot and big lot, was the linchpin. If Linda and Margaret controlled it, they could sell the whole street to developers for millions. The Ashwood Lane HOA wasn't about community. It was a tool to force sales, with Henry covering tracks with fake reports, and Margaret funding it from the shadows. I got home, reviewed the camera footage and the meeting recording. Linda didn't know I had proof, not just her whispers with Henry, but her plan laid bare to the HOA crowd. Henry, with his cold eyes in the video, looked like a man who'd burn a house without blinking. As I sat in the study with my laptop, reviewing the footage and recording from Linda Grayson's HOA meeting, a soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock, nearly 9 p.m., when Ashwood Lane usually fell quiet. I opened the door, and there stood Clara Evans, a frail 70-year-old from across the street. Clara was the first to greet me when I moved to Fairview, with a plate of homemade cookies. But now her face was etched with worry, her trembling hands clutching a handkerchief. James, I need to talk, Clara whispered, glancing over her shoulder like someone might be watching. I let her in, shutting the door carefully. Clara sat in Grandpa's armchair, sighing. I heard Linda's meeting last night. I know she's targeting you. I've wanted to warn you for a while, but I was scared. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. Clara said Linda forced her into the HOA 6 months ago, after relentless notices about her little rock garden, planted to honor her late husband. One night, someone dumped chemicals on it, ruining everything. The next morning, Linda showed up with her fake smile, offering to help replace it with beige-compliant shrubs. Clara refused, but threats of fines of accidents made her cave. I don't want you to end up like me, Clara said. Eyes welling up. Linda won't stop. She's done this to others. She pulled a handwritten note from her pocket, handing it to me, names and addresses of 2 families who'd lived in Fairview before vanishing. They fought Linda, and then their homes had trouble. I think you can do something. I nodded, thanked her, and promised to look into it. Clara left, her small figure fading into the night, but her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The next morning, I drove to the first address on the note, the Patel family's old home, once at the end of Ashwood Lane. Now it was an overgrown empty lot. I tracked their number through a Fairview police contact and called. Priya Patel answered, voice shaky when I mentioned Linda. They moved 2 years ago, after their garage burned in an electrical fire, a blaze Henry Grayson investigated and quickly deemed accidental. We refused the HOA, Priya said. Then came warnings, vandalism, and finally the fire. We had no proof, so we sold cheap to escape that nightmare. I heard her choke back tears over lost family photos in the flames. The second address led me to Miguel Torres, a retired carpenter now in Portland's suburbs. I met him at a small diner. Miguel, with a weathered face and scarred hands, said Linda targeted him for refusing to swap his handmade wooden fence for HOA-approved plastic. One night, his fence was smashed. A week later, his tool shed burned down. Henry investigated, ruling it an accident from spilled gas. Miguel sold to Pierce Holdings for 1/3 of market value, unable to take the pressure. I lost all my father's keepsakes, he said, eyes red. Linda's a devil in human skin. Hearing Clara, Priya and Miguel, I saw Linda wasn't just after me. She had a pattern: harass, sabotage, then stage accidents to force sales. Henry covered it up, Margaret scooped the land, and Linda pulled the strings. My house was the final piece to turn Ashwood Lane into developer gold. But Clara changed everything. She wasn't just a victim, she was my first ally, and people like Priya and Miguel fueled me to turn this personal fight into a bigger case. I got home, adding their names to my growing file. Linda might think she held all the cards with her HOA, but she'd just awakened an alliance she didn't expect. I wasn't just protecting my house anymore. I was fighting for everyone she'd ruined. With my experience dismantling real estate mafias, I knew how to take down someone like Linda. With Clara Evans gone, and the stories of the Patel family and Miguel Torres burned into my mind, I knew Linda Grayson wouldn't stop at warning letters or lawnmowers. She'd destroyed others' lives, and I was next. I checked my security cameras every night, waiting for her next move. It didn't take long for Linda to prove me right, and this time, she struck at what I cherished most: Grandpa's carnation garden at 142 Ashwood Lane. It was a Tuesday night, around midnight. I was reviewing files in the study, when the motion lights outside flicked on. I pulled up the camera feed. 3 figures stood near my fence, one holding a chemical sprayer. I zoomed in, Linda Grayson, in a dark hoodie instead of her usual haughty silk, flanked by 2 men. One was Henry, his tall frame unmistakable. The other I didn't recognize, but his voice came through the footage: make it quick, before anyone sees. Linda nodded, pointing at the carnations. Focus on the flowers. He loves them, that's his weakness. They started spraying, white chemical fumes rising in the cold air. I bolted outside, phone already recording. What are you doing? I yelled from the porch. Linda flinched, turning but quickly regained her composure. Her fake smile gleamed under the lights. Oh James, we're just helping you. These flowers are invasive. HOA has strict rules on non-compliant plants. She kept spraying, the chemicals soaking into the soil, where Grandpa once carefully sowed seeds. Henry stepped forward, hands in pockets, voice low. Don't make a scene. This is for the neighborhood's good. My blood boiled, but I kept my tone steady. 20 years in court taught me not to let emotion win. They're not invasive, Linda. These are Victorian carnations, planted in 1940. I've got papers from the local garden society. You're vandalizing private property, and I've got proof. I held up my phone, its screen light hitting her face. Linda stopped spraying, eyes narrowing. The third man, a burly guy with dirty boots, stepped back, muttering to Henry. Linda smirked. Someone complained about the smell, James, and those thorns, dangerous for kids passing by. On my land, behind my fence, I shot back, flipping on the yard lights to highlight the boundary. You're trespassing. Leave, now. Henry advanced, his cold stare the same as our last encounter. Don't throw around accusations, he said, old cop tone thick. We're just maintaining standards. No one wants to live next to a dump. But I saw Clara Evans peeking through her curtains across the street. She'd seen it all, and I knew she'd back me up if needed. The next morning, Grandpa's carnation garden was dead. The vibrant blooms that once lit up the corner were black, wilted husks on the ground. I stood there, fists clenched, feeling like Linda hadn't just killed flowers. She'd killed part of my memory. But she'd made a huge mistake. This wasn't just on camera, it had a witness. I saved the video to my hard drive, adding it to my growing file on Linda, Henry, and their plot. Clara knocked, soon after, eyes red. I saw everything last night, she said. I'll testify if you need me. She can't keep doing this. I nodded, thanking her. Linda might think she was winning by destroying the garden, but she just handed me more ammo. With Clara, the Patels, and Miguel Torres behind me, I wasn't a lone man against the HOA anymore. Linda, Henry, and the third guy, likely Margaret Pierce's muscle, didn't know I was ready to turn this vandalism into legal evidence. They wanted the garden to be my weakness, but they were wrong. It was the fire driving me to take them down. After the carnation vandalism, I knew Linda Grayson wouldn't stop. She'd proven it with Clara, the Patels, and Miguel Torres. But I didn't expect her to act so fast, or so ruthlessly. The night after Clara promised to testify, I was working in the study, organizing my case against Linda, when a faint whiff of smoke slipped through the door crack. I looked up, heart pounding. I raced outside and the sight stopped me cold. My Victorian house, the one Grandpa built, the one I swore to protect, was engulfed in flames. Bright orange fire licked the deep green paint, black smoke billowed and the sound of splintering wood roared like a scream. I ran inside, ignoring the searing heat hitting my face. I had to save something, Grandpa's legal journals, the bookshelf, or at least the family photo on the table. Thick smoke stung my eyes, burned my lungs. I tripped over Grandpa's armchair, grabbed a journal from the shelf, but flames blocked the exit. Glass shattered as windows exploded. The stained glass he'd bought from an old church raining down. I coughed, head spinning, but distant sirens snapped me back. I stumbled out the back door, journal clutched to my chest, collapsing in the yard as firefighters arrived. They shouted, dragging me away, but I could only watch my house fall, every plank, every memory, turned to ash. Through the smoke, I saw Linda in her yard, coffee mug in hand, a triumphant smile clear on her made-up face. Henry stood beside her, phone to his ear, whispering to someone. A few HOA members gathered nearby, pointing and chuckling like it was a show. The fire captain, a tall man named Ramirez, approached, face grim. Mr. Carter, looks like an electrical fire. Old houses like this, wiring can go bad. I shook my head, voice hoarse. No, I had the system checked last week. Everything was up to code. Ramirez frowned, jotting something down, but I knew he couldn't act without proof. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, checking the security footage, but the screen was blank. They'd stopped recording at 2 a.m., exactly 4 hours before the fire. Not a coincidence. Linda had planned this, and Henry, with his cop experience, knew how to cover it up. I glared at her through the haze. Her eyes met mine for a second, then she turned away, sipping her coffee like nothing happened. Heat from the ruins still scorched my skin, but colder was the certainty. Linda burned my house because I wouldn't join the HOA, because I dared defy her. As the firefighters doused the blaze, I stood amid the ashes, Grandpa's journal, the only thing left in my hands. The Victorian, with its green paint he mixed, the wind chimes that lulled me, the bookshelf bearing his fingerprints was gone. I remembered afternoons on the rocker, hearing his stories, the day I graduated law school, and celebrated in the garden, the moment I swore to protect it. All gone up in smoke because Linda wanted this land for her $1 million scheme. Through the crowd of onlookers, I spotted two faces, Henry and the third man from the garden vandalism, his dirty boots now coated in ash, not mud. Linda approached, voice sickeningly sweet. "Awful, James. If only you'd joined the HOA. We have strict safety rules. But you insisted on keeping this old thing." She lingered on old like an insult, taking another sip. I bit my lip till it bled, staying silent. It wasn't time to play my hand. Linda thought she'd broken me, that I'd crumple like her other victims. She was wrong. As she walked away, I made 3 calls, one to an FBI friend, one to a colleague at the state prosecutor's office, and one to a trusted PI. Linda didn't see me do it, but I caught a flicker of unease when she glanced back. Good, let her worry. My house might be ash, but my power, the justice I wield, can't be burned. After the fire, I moved into a small rented apartment on the edge of Fairview, carrying Grandpa's singed journal and a suitcase of clothes. Standing amid the ruins that morning, watching Linda sip her coffee with a triumphant smile, I made 3 calls to the FBI, the state prosecutor's office, and a private investigator. I was done playing defense. Linda wanted war, and I'd give her a battle she'd never forget. But first, I needed the truth, the whole truth, and I knew how to get it. I started with Daniel Brooks, my clerk at the federal courthouse in Portland. Daniel, a sharp 30-year-old with messy hair, had worked with me on big cases, including the Seattle real estate mafia takedown. I called him the next day, voice raspy from smoke still in my throat. "Daniel, I need you to help me investigate a personal matter. The Ashwood Lane HOA burned my house, and I've got preliminary evidence." He showed up at my apartment that afternoon, laptop and a large coffee in tow. I showed him the garden vandalism footage, the HOA meeting recording, and recounted the fire. Daniel frowned. "This isn't regular harassment, Judge. This is organized crime." Next, I reached out to Olivia Hayes, a local Fairview journalist I'd known from an old case. Olivia, with fiery red hair and a blunt demeanor, had written about mysterious fires in the area, but lacked proof to go public. I met her at a small diner, handing over a copy of the recording, where Linda talked about handling my house. "Olivia, I need you to stir the pot," I said. "Don't name me, just say anonymous source." 3 days later, her article hit the Fairview Gazette, "String of House Fires in Ashwood Lane, Accidents or Conspiracy." It didn't just mention my fire. It listed 12 similar incidents over 5 years, all tied to homes that refused the HOA, then sold to Pierce Holdings. Daniel and I dug into the data. With my access to federal legal databases and his analytical skills, we found a clear pattern. 12 homes burned or heavily damaged in Fairview since 2020 shared a thread. Owners resisted the Ashwood Lane HOA, and after accidents, they sold cheap to Pierce Holdings. Henry Grayson investigated 8, all ruled accidents with no follow-up. Pierce Holdings, under Margaret Pierce, Linda's sister-in-law, then flipped the land to a major Portland developer, pocketing millions. My house was the final piece to complete the plot for the commercial project I'd uncovered in county records. Olivia called back after the article, voice buzzing. "James, I'm flooded with reader emails. Some say they saw Henry near homes before fires, but were too scared to speak. I told her to keep in touch with them, promising anonymity if they testified. Meanwhile, my PI, a gruff man named Ray Carter, sent a preliminary report. Ray confirmed Linda and Henry met a developer named Victor Langston at a swanky Portland restaurant the week before. Langston was CEO of the company behind the commercial project. Ray even got photos, Linda beaming, wineglass in hand, while Henry whispered to Langston. I sat with Daniel that night, organizing evidence, the vandalism footage, HOA meeting recording, land sale records, Olivia's article, and Ray's photos. Linda didn't know the pressure was mounting. The article had Ashwood Lane neighbors buzzing, some called Olivia, recounting warnings and harassment they'd faced. Clara Evans visited my apartment, bringing a tin of cookies and a vow. "I'll go to court if you need me, James. She can't keep doing this." I smiled, thanking her. Clara, Priya Patel, Miguel Torres, they were the drops that would overflow the cup. Linda might think she'd won by burning my house, but she just pushed me into my strongest arena: investigation and justice. With Daniel analyzing, Olivia stirring, and Ray tracking, I was building a case to not just take down Linda, but Henry, Margaret, and whoever backed them. Linda wanted my land for her $1 million project. I'd show her the cost of crossing James Carter, not with fire, but with the law. After Olivia Hayes's article shook Fairview, Linda Grayson didn't sit still. She knew the pressure was rising, but instead of backing off, she doubled down. A week after the fire, I got a notice from the Fairview City Council, a public meeting at Town Hall to discuss land rezoning in Ashwood Lane. I read it closely. Linda and her HOA proposed turning the neighborhood into a mixed commercial zone, allowing old homes to be razed for a shopping center. My burned house, now ash, was listed as a public hazard property, subject to seizure if I didn't cooperate. Linda was trying to force me to sell through legal means, but she didn't know I was ready for this move. I went to Town Hall that night, bringing my deed and a copy of Olivia's article. The room was packed. Neighbors, city officials, and a few strangers in pricey suits, likely Victor Langston's lackeys. Linda stood at the podium in a sharp navy blazer, HOA badge gleaming, voice smooth as honey. "Ashwood Lane needs modernization," she said, projecting a PowerPoint slide of my house's ashes. "Properties like this drag down our value. We propose rezoning to benefit the community. Jobs, stores, progress." Scattered applause broke out. But I saw Clara Evans in the back, shaking her head. When it opened for questions, I stood, voice calm but cutting. "I'm James Carter, owner of 142 Ashwood Lane. This proposal violates private property rights. My deed dates to 1940, predating any HOA rules or rezoning plans." I held up the papers. "Plus, my house fire wasn't an accident. I have evidence of prior vandalism by Miss Grayson's HOA." The room buzzed. Linda smirked, still poised. "Mr. Carter, I get that you're upset about losing your house, but don't throw around blame. Electrical fires happen in old homes. We're just trying to help the neighborhood." I stepped forward, placing Olivia's article on the council table. "This reports 12 similar fires in Fairview, all tied to HOA refusers, all now owned by Pierce Holdings, Grayson's sister-in-law's company." "This isn't help, it's a land grab scheme," whispers spread. A council member, Mr. Harris, frowned. "Mr. Carter, do you have proof?" I nodded. "I've got vandalism footage and recordings from Miss Grayson herself, being verified by law enforcement." Linda paled for a second, then snapped back. "This is slander. I'll sue you for this." I locked eyes with her. "Go ahead, Miss Grayson. But the law won't back someone who burns houses for profit." Henry, near the door, clenched his fists, his cold stare boring into me. The council called a recess to review, but I'd planted doubt. Linda didn't win that day. Her proposal got delayed for investigation. As I left Town Hall, Clara patted my shoulder. "You did great, James. They're starting to get scared." But Linda didn't give up. The next morning, a rumor swept Fairview, via social media and neighbor whispers. I'd burned my own house for insurance money, and was now framing the HOA for revenge. I overheard someone at the grocery store mutter, "Carter's unhinged burned his place and blamed them." I knew Linda was behind it. She wanted to smear me before I could expose her, but it only hardened my resolve. With Daniel Brooks dissecting records, Olivia fueling outrage, and Ray Carter tailing Victor Langston, I was tightening the noose around Linda. After the town hall clash, Linda Grayson couldn't hide her unease, though she tried to keep up her confident front. Rumors I'd burned my own house spread fast in Fairview, but Olivia Hayes' article and whispers from Clara Evans had neighbors doubting. I knew the time was ripe. Linda would try to shore up power at the next HOA meeting, and that's when I'd unmask her. With evidence from Daniel Brooks, public pressure from Olivia, and intel from Ray Carter, I coordinated with the FBI to turn that meeting into the final trap. The meeting happened at the Ashwood Lane Community Center a week later. I arrived early, carrying a briefcase of files, garden vandalism footage, the prior HOA meeting recording, Pierce Holdings documents, and photos of Linda with Victor Langston. Under my coat, I wore an FBI wire. Agent Evans, my friend from the Seattle Mafia case, had agreed to monitor. The room was packed with neighbors, some anxious, some curious. Linda stood at the podium, coffee mug in hand, voice syrupy. "The property at 142 Ashwood Lane is now a public hazard," she declared, projecting an image of my house's ashes. "Under HOA emergency powers, we'll proceed with redevelopment immediately." Murmurs rose. Clara sat in the back, fists clenched. "No objections?" Linda asked, smug smile wide. I stood, walking down the aisle, shoes echoing on the wood floor. "I object, Miss Grayson." All eyes turned to me. Linda smirked. "James, here to admit defeat? Your pile of ash is an embarrassment to the neighborhood. We're doing you a favor." I opened my briefcase, laying out photos. "This is footage of you and Mr. Grayson vandalizing my garden on March 12th. This is you on record saying you'd handle my house to boost property values." The room erupted in whispers. Linda scoffed. "Anyone can fake that. You've got nothing." I pressed on, voice icy. "These are bank records. Pierce Holdings raked in hundreds of thousands after each Fairview fire, including 12 homes before mine. These are emails between you and Victor Langston, discussing forcing out non-HOA owners. And this," I held up my phone playing Linda's voice message, "is you ordering my house fire staged as an electrical accident." Gasps broke from the crowd. Clara shot up, pointing at Linda. "I saw her ruin your flowers, James. I'll testify." Linda dropped her mug, hot coffee splashing her shoes. "This is fabrication. I'll sue you for defamation." That's when I played my ace. I pulled my judge's robe from the briefcase, slipping it on in the room's dead silence. "I'm Judge James Carter, Federal Court, currently overseeing Case 2025 CR 142, United States v. Grayson et al., a RICO investigation into corruption, fraud, and criminal conspiracy." Linda's face went white, mouth agape like a stranded fish. I continued. "The FBI's heard everything through the wire I'm wearing tonight. You're done." The doors burst open, Agent Evans leading an FBI team in badges raised. "Linda Grayson, Henry Grayson, you're under arrest for suspected arson and fraud." Henry lunged for the exit, but two agents tackled him, cuffing him amid Linda's screams. "You can't do this." I stepped close as she slumped in the HOA chair, trembling. "The biggest criminals, Miss Grayson, always think they're untouchable. You forgot to check who you were up against." I picked up the gavel she'd used to run the meeting, the one she'd once sentenced my house with, and banged it on the table. Meeting adjourned. The clink of handcuffs rang out as Linda, Henry, and two other HOA members were led away. Neighbors broke into applause. Clara hugged me, tears streaming. "Thank you, James. We're free." As Linda Grayson, Henry, and their cronies were cuffed and hauled off by the FBI from the HOA meeting, the air in Ashwood Lane shifted. The neighbors' applause wasn't just for my win, it was for their release from Linda's grip. But I knew justice wasn't complete. Arrests were just the start. As James Carter, federal judge, I didn't just want Linda to pay for burning my Victorian house. I wanted her and her entire criminal network dismantled. The trial was the final blow, and I'd sit on the bench to ensure it. The trial came 3 months later at the federal courthouse in Portland. The courtroom was packed. Fairview neighbors, past victims like Priya Patel and Miguel Torres, reporters from across Oregon, and Olivia Hayes, who'd made this a headline story. Linda walked in, no silk or HOA badge, just an orange jumpsuit, hair tied back, eyes averted. Henry sat beside her, head down, no trace of the ex-cop's chill. I stepped to the bench, black robe flowing, looking down at them. Linda whispered to her lawyer, panicked, "That's him, the guy whose house we burned." Her lawyer dropped his pen, face paling. The prosecutor, backed by the FBI and my evidence, laid out the case like an open book. Linda Grayson, Henry Grayson, and Margaret Pierce ran a criminal enterprise under the guise of the Ashwood Lane HOA, he began. They played the footage of Linda vandalizing my carnations, the recording of her ordering my house handled, and the voice message about the fire. The courtroom went silent as video from the night my house burned rolled. Linda and Henry nearby, the third man with dirty boots visible, gas can in hand, Small cries rose from the gallery. Clara Evans covered her mouth, tears falling. The financial records came next. Pierce Holdings pocketed $2.3 million from 15 land purchases following fires over the past 5 years, all from homes that resisted the HOA. Margaret, arrested after the meeting thanks to my wire, testified that Linda was the mastermind, using Henry to cover up and Victor Langston to sell the land for the commercial project. But the biggest shock came when Henry turned on Linda. Under pressure from the prosecutor, he stood, voice trembling. "She told me to do it. Linda picked the targets, planned the fires, and I just followed because she promised me a cut." Linda screamed liar, so loud the bailiffs had to pull her down. I banged the gavel calling for order. A parade of witnesses took the stand. Clara recounted the night of the garden vandalism, voice steady. Priya Patel cried as she described the garage fire and lost family photos. Miguel Torres held up scarred hands, speaking of his burned shed. Each story made Linda shrink in her jumpsuit, her eyes now full of fear instead of arrogance. The prosecutor closed. These weren't random accidents. This was an organized criminal system, and Linda Grayson was the ringleader. The jury took just 2 hours to deliver the verdict, guilty on all counts, arson, fraud, and RICO conspiracy. I stood to read the sentence, voice steady, though my heart raced. Linda Grayson, you're sentenced to 25 years without parole for masterminding 15 arsons and real estate fraud. Henry Grayson, 15 years for complicity and cover-ups. Margaret Pierce, 10 years for financial aiding. Linda tried to shout a defense. I just wanted to improve the neighborhood. I cut her off, banging the gavel. You ruined lives for greed, Miss Grayson. Justice is served. The gavel's echo rang like the toll ending her reign. Linda was led away, her hateful glare meeting mine one last time, but now it meant nothing. The courtroom erupted in applause. Clara, Priya, and Miguel hugged, tears mixing with smiles. Olivia rushed over, recording my words. This is a win for Fairview. I stepped off the bench, looking at Grandpa's singed journal in my hand. Linda had burned my house, but she couldn't burn the justice I brought. The trial didn't just convict her, it restored freedom to those she'd oppressed. 6 months after the trial, I stood at 142 Ashwood Lane, Fairview, Oregon, watching workers finish the final coat of paint on the new Victorian house. Linda Grayson had torched my grandfather's legacy, but she couldn't destroy my will, or this neighborhood's. The house stood tall again, its deep green paint matching what Grandpa once mixed, the carnation garden replanted from cuttings. Clara Evans saved that vandalism night. I didn't just rebuild a house, I rebuilt a symbol, that justice, though slow, always wins. The trial ended Linda's reign with 25 years for her, 15 for Henry, and 10 for Margaret Pierce. Their assets were seized to compensate victims. The house next door sold to a young immigrant family, who turned Linda's front yard into a kid's play space, not a spot for her smirks. Pierce Holdings collapsed, Victor Langston faced a bribery probe, and the commercial project died when the city council rejected rezoning. Ashwood Lane was no longer prey to greed, it became our home, truly. I moved into the new house today, bringing Grandpa's singed journal, and the coffee mug Linda dropped the night she was caught, now a desk decoration, a reminder that even the strongest foes can fall. Clara helped me replant the garden, her shaky hands setting each carnation in the soil. This is our victory, James, she said, smiling. Priya Patel and Miguel Torres visited, bringing food and laughter. They weren't afraid anymore. Neighbors, once forced into the HOA, now formed a real community group. No fees, no silly rules, just people helping each other. That evening we held a housewarming in the garden. Laughter rang out, the smell of grilled meat and Priya's empanadas filling the air. Clara retold the night. I exposed Linda, voice proud. Miguel played guitar, singing a Mexican folk song his father taught him. Kids from next door ran through, chasing each other among the carnations. Olivia Hayes arrived, recording for her final article, From Linda Grayson's Ashes, Ashwood Lane Reborn as True Community. I stood on the porch, watching everyone, feeling the warmth of the new house, not just wood and paint, but the humanity Linda never grasped. The next day I announced a small legal fund, the Thomas Carter Fund, named for Grandpa, to help Oregonians harassed by HOAs. Clara, Priya, and Miguel were the first to pitch in, each giving a bit from their compensation. "So no one suffers like we did," Priya said, eyes bright. I nodded, knowing Grandpa would be proud, not just for keeping my promise to protect the house, but for turning pain into strength for others. Every morning now, I sit on the new rocker, a replica of the old one, sipping coffee, watching the sunrise through stained glass windows I had remade like Grandpa's favorites. The wind chimes, rebuilt from his design, clink in the breeze, like his whisper that I did right. Passers-by sometimes stop, thanking me, not as a judge, but for standing up to Linda when they couldn't. A boy from next door ran up, handing me a carnation from the garden. "Thanks for chasing the witch away," he said, grinning. I laughed, setting the flower on the table. The story of James Carter and his fight with Linda Grayson reflects many real facets of life in the U.S. today, especially issues of property rights, HOA overreach, and justice's power against corruption. In modern America, HOAs often exist to maintain community standards, but some, like Linda's, become tools for people to coerce, harass, and even commit crimes for personal gain, as she did by burning James's house for a commercial project. This mirrors real disputes in U.S. neighborhoods, where residents face sky-high fees or lose personal freedoms to arbitrary rules. James, a federal judge, represents those who don't bow, using legal knowledge and alliances with Clara, Priya, and Miguel to fight back, embodying the resilient American spirit against injustice. The lesson isn't just patience or faith in justice, it's taking concrete action to protect your rights in today's world. James didn't just wait, he set up cameras, recorded, contacted the FBI, and confronted Linda at town hall, showing the importance of gathering evidence and using America's legal system, which lets individuals sue or report violations. Rebuilding his house with that deep green paint and starting the Thomas Carter Fund reminds us that in America, you can turn loss into community strength if you don't give up, just as James turned ashes into a united Ashwood Lane. Practical advice: if facing overreach like an HOA, don't stay silent, learn the law, like James with his deed, build alliances like with Clara, and tap resources like the press or law enforcement, Olivia and the FBI. Culture valuing individualism and justice, this story teaches you must be proactive, smart, and persistent, because even the mighty like Linda fall to truth and unwavering resolve. Thanks for joining James Carter's justice journey. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories of fighting injustice like this. See you in the next video, where we'll keep exploring the power of truth and community.